All right. This is the Nephew SIG Release Meetings for July 17th, 2023. Looking at the agenda is mainly Rado, so go ahead, Rado.
Yeah, hi everyone. Let me just try sharing the screen. All right. Yeah, I don't really have much for today. To be honest, there are just two things. Pro upgrades incoming. I'd like to finish this this week, and I'm also in my testing environment. I'm trying out the Tecton pipelines to connect them with Pro for more complicated tasks, which require multiple builds depending on each other. One of which is going to be changed in end-to-end testing framework to be able to use the code which is not already merged to run end-to-end tests on it. So to produce the images from PRs, the content of PR, and then be able to use the end-to-end testing framework to test it out if the change was it's not breaking the compatibility and so on. So that's what's been going on for me. Had some trouble with my local environment here. I was using the micro K8s mainly installed by Snap on Ubuntu, and at one point I guess I messed something up with a Snap cache, and it just pulled the rug from under the feet of basically everything I got installed here. So yeah, took me some time over the weekend to restore it to the previous state. Well, other than this, I don't really have much for today's meeting, really.
Okay. So I noticed that John is going to upgrade Porch, I think, or do some changes. Actually, correspondingly also change, I think, the approval controller. So is 1.01 released? Is there like a day we're supposed to be targeting? Does anyone know? Because no one actually told me anything about one. Well, I mean, I guess anything that check in now into the. So a couple questions, right? So what John does, he's for all the changes he did. Well, John's not here, but for all the changes he did was there like a 1.0 branch pull already from anything that he changed? And then actually in general, was there any 1.0 branch pull in any of the repos? I think that's a question for Rado.
Yeah, yeah, I've seen that there were branches created. So there's 1.0.0 for now. So which is gonna be kind of like a maintenance branch for R1. And yeah, but for like what's the flow?
This is our strategy, right? So if we are checking in anything right now that are still on the 1.0 branch, 1.0 train of released, because we're going to have a 1.0.1.
Yep.
Many people, and if everyone in the community told me that, so I'm assuming that's the case. And then in theory, 1.0.1 is off of 1.0. And then also the fix would have to be double commit into main.
Right. Yeah, that was my impression. That
yeah. Okay.
That's what we're gonna do.
I think John is fixing in main, not the moment.
Okay. Interesting.
I don't know. I mean, I'm
yeah. So main stuff supposedly goes into. So I don't know for sure.
That's the point.
Either 1.1. Either there will be a 1.1 at some point, or 2.0, which probably is going to be a 1.1 at some point. So anything that goes into main right now goes into 1.1, but it doesn't go into 1.0.
Yeah.
That also includes auto maintenance release, which is 1.01, which is what we've been talking about, saying that whatever, because 1.0 officially is poll, so all the Docker images and branch snapshots would be on 1.0 branch or tags. And then anything that you still want to put into this, we may have a maintenance or patch released a couple of weeks later or so on. And then that would be off of 1.00. And then we'll probably call it 1.01. At some point, we'll probably just tag it instead of branch it. But then anything that you check in right now into main, it would be 1.1, I would imagine, unless you're double committed into 1.0. So that's, I mean, I don't think anyone, Rado particularly, is planning any like automatic sync between the branches. So if anything, so the strategy would be, if anything you're doing right now that needs to go into the patch released, it should double commit.
Yep. Okay. Well, I personally, I am kind of against of creating branches, as you know, as long as we can deal without creating them. I think it's good, because at the end, what it happens, I mean, it's kind of clear to understand what's going on if you branch everything and you divide it to these segments with one dot something, blah, blah, blah. But then you're reaching the point that you actually have to merge from one branch to the other.
I don't know if that's a community expectations. There is a possibility, however remote, that we may have some change that only pertains to 2.0 but not 1.0. So those things, in that case, your 1.0 is maintained because it's officially released, although it's not like anyone's using it, but it's officially released. So if any fixes that needs to go in, it will be off that branch, and it allows you the freedom to even do like architectural changes on the main branch. Right. That is supposed to go into 1.1 or 2.0 without the concern of actually messing up any maintenance patches into 1.0.
Right.
Again, right at this point, yeah, sure, it could be a little more loose, but then obviously we would like to have the workflow fixed, even for this release, so that people have some expectations of what it's supposed to go.
Right. So yeah.
But in any case, if John commits something only into main, that doesn't go into 1.01. So that's the only thing I want to make a comment on.
I want to suggest maybe a different way of doing this. I think double committing is going to be really confusing. I would suggest that we would do all your commits on main. No, nothing automatic, actually. I would suggest do all the commits on main. That's the normal workflow. But when we get to the point where we want to cut the 1.0.1 release, we will decide, go repo by repo, what we actually want to backport, right? So we would do explicit backporting of features that we want for 1.01. I think otherwise this kind of double commit on extra branches is going to be confusing, right? So we can decide collectively what 1.0.1 will be, right? What we want to include and what we don't want to include. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sounds good. Sounds good to me, honestly.
My only concern with that is that if the cycle is too long, it becomes a challenge, right? So because what we do normally inside of our company is we always commit to main, and then we know which fixes need to. So at the time when you commit, you we have kind of a scrub where we say, or a scrub meeting where we basically, and which happens more than once a week, but where we selectively say these needs to go in, and those get automatic. So then they get committed to both within a week. Right? Actually, it's even shorter.
I mean, another concern I have for polling backport 1.01 only after some time has passed is that that kind of almost preclude you from doing drastic changes. I'm not saying we're doing drastic changes. I'm just saying that it would be discouraging people from doing drastic changes onto the main branch, because there's a possibility that we need a 1.02 or 1.01 or whatever, or 1.03.
We might need to make a specific new PR for 1.01, which is different from main. But look, this is a challenge of maintaining previous previous branches. It's hard for every project.
Mhm.
The point is that we don't want to put a lot into 1.0.1, right? It should be very, very specific.
Oh, no, yeah. So we should because 1.0, we should basically stop supporting 1.0 relatively early. I mean, there's no governance or policy right now, but then because 1.0 is great, but it's kind of rushed out. So I'm sure there's a whole list of changes that we would like to do.
So my understanding is what John wants to do in 1.0.1 is really a stability fix, right? So
yes,
that's totally
no feature for sure. No feature. 1.01 is just maintenance. It's a patch release, and moving forward is the same thing. If we have the third number of the decimal upgrade is a patch release, you shouldn't add new features into that.
Right. So
if you go with Kubernetes, then we never go to 2.0. It's always going to be 1. something. So major release, I have no idea how that's supposed to go. Minor release, if it's like Kubernetes, you can have all the new features you want. So major release is a really big discussion moving forward.
Yeah. So one thing also, if we want 1.0.1 to really be about stability, we also had a lot of documentation fixes that I think would also count.
Yeah,
so
those should go in.
Might
for
include those as well, right, in 1.0.1. So yeah, my suggestion moving forward: do all the work in main. Don't worry about it. Like everybody should not start thinking this will go here or there. When we want to cut the release, we'll go through repo by repo, everything that happened since the tag, and just decide what we want to backport to 1.0.1. Yeah, it'll be a little bit of work for sure, but that's just how it is, I think. Yeah.
I mean, today, no major changes are happening anyhow at the moment. So we're only doing fixes, in my view, at the moment. So it's okay for now. But I think
for now it is. Yeah.
Yeah. I think going forward, if you really are developing in parallel stuff, right?
Yeah.
We'll have to do something different. But okay, I think for now it's okay.
Technically speaking, no one's actually doing anything actively for 1.1, other than maybe I'm working on the NF topology stuff. I don't think anyone's doing something that is really going to 1.1 instead of 1.01. Yeah, so I think it's okay for now. But then moving forward, we do have to have a strategy. Once we released, we have to maintain the patch release train, versus allowing people to open up main and start doing things for the next release.
So I do think it might be at some point we might have let's say we do a release like 2.0.0, which includes for some reason a mistake happened, some very terrible thing that we need to fix. So we might very specifically work on that branch, but that should be kind of a strategic, doing a double commit or I don't know, something like that. But my point is, let's handle things as they happen, because every issue we'll have is, its own little story. So we just have to decide on a case-by-case basis maybe what to do. But I still think the general rule for the community is put all your fixes on main, don't worry about it. Right? We worry about it when we actually cut the release. That's my main point. Otherwise, it'll just be chaos, I think, working on multiple branches.
Well, for now, it's okay. I think for now, it's okay at all, right? Let's assume that this project becomes real, used in production. We probably have to reconsider, but we are probably far from that.
The Linux kernel works, right? Because they specifically talk about backporting, right? So you do a fix in the new kernel, and let's say, oh, this is a security problem that existed before. So sometimes you go back, multiple branches even to fix it, right?
Yeah, that is when you have a very long backport of people using the legacy releases, then we have to do it. But then right now we just want to have a branch commit strategy during the time of we're still maintaining the previous release of patches. But then while other one will be in parallel working on the next release already in terms of development.
Yeah.
So we're not at that level. Either case, we're not at that level. The patch releases are really just there, because 1.0 got shipped out with a lot of known issues, so we fix them one by one. And then practically speaking, no one's very actively doing 1.1 yet.
Right.
So backporting is fine for now, but then I would imagine moving forward, we probably need to have a strategy on how to do this.
Well, a question maybe for Rado and for everybody really. So part of it also, if we're maintaining other previous branches and releases, we need a way to end-to-end test them, right? So we need a way to say end-to-end test 1.0 branch while we're working on 1.1 branch too, right? I wonder if we have a strategy for that, or if that even works, right?
Yeah, that is the testing. Yeah, at some point the automated integration test, which is running. I think when we agree on a long time ago is only run on intervals until we pull the release, in which case maybe every commit needs to be running through this test.
Right.
Because the test, presumably the test will become bigger and bigger, hopefully anyway.
Yeah.
And then so those would be release. Those tests would be definitely release specific. I mean, we build on top of it, but then
the strategy has to take into account the image tags as well, right? So I think of it this way: that main branch is always related to latest tags, right? Because you're always working at the tip. So all tests would be on latest, but for branches, it will always have to be a specific image tag, right? Because you don't want to test latest because that would be the wrong branch, right? So we'll have to have a good strategy for that. It's not so trivial.
Yeah. They have the automated system needs to be smart enough to know we're pulling from those images, and only for this we're pulling from this change, and then compile it and then try it, running through the tests for pre-submit. Yeah, that's all part of the things that doesn't exist yet. But then once we get to the next release and then have to maintain the older release is when we start to see what's missing on the test infrastructure.
There's actually a PR I want to kind of discuss with you. I didn't put it on the agenda, but somebody external who's not part of the community did a pull request to Free5GC to update the container image generation. So not for the operator, but for the Free5GC. Yeah, you can go to PRs and you'll see, I don't know who this person is, but upgrade, the first one. External to our community.
I saw that over the weekend too. I don't know why someone would do that.
So it upgrades, I haven't tested this at all, but it doesn't upgrade the operators. It just upgrades our image generation, and I haven't even tested it yet, but
I know. Well, interesting. Why would this person do it?
I think I looked at this person's GitHub user, and it seems a person who works a lot on Free5GC, lots of different projects.
Okay.
So yeah, this is very welcome. Of course, people from outside the community helping, right?
Isn't this a person that was asking on the Slack some questions recently about getting involved?
I don't know.
Let me check.
So yeah, they would also have to, of course, sign
that too.
Yeah, but
the CLA and everything.
The comment I did, if you scroll down a bit in the conversation, I just did this a little bit more. Scroll down.
Oh, he already signed it.
Yes, his LFX EasyCLA covered.
So if you scroll down here, my suggestion was, and I don't know if this should be something we do in all places, but here's the thing, right? So this is a 3.3 branch of Free5GC, and it's not just new container images; it's actually different configuration, right? So
that's why I'm worried. If the config changes, then it breaks. So we can't accept it. That's why we don't have any. That's the problem. Is we don't have any automated test to catch this at this point.
So my suggestion for their PR was this: so here's the thing. If we just accept the PR, then that means that the 3.2 branch is kind of lost in the commit history, right? So if you want to regenerate the old 3.2 images for some reason, I don't know, let's say a new version of Go comes out, which fixes, actually Go 1.20.5 was recently released, which with some security fixes to the net package. So I don't know. It's not something. It's not something we especially care about right now. But you know, at some point we might care. So we might want to regenerate the 3.2 images, even though we're working with 3.3 images. So my suggestion here, and this is where I want feedback from you guys, that I said, well, let's not just bury it in the commit history. Let's actually create a separate directory. So we could always generate both 3.2 and 3.3 with the latest commit, right? So you can do make images. I forget what the make task is, but you could recreate both 3.2 and 3.3.
Right, yeah.
Right. Does that make sense to you guys? Is my suggestion?
Yes, sounds good. Sounds good actually. Otherwise, you would have to kind of dig out through commits.
Exactly. Then you would have to create a separate branch because the version of Free5GC is not directly connected to our own versioning, right? It's you know, probably
no. So we don't automatically pick up the upgrades. We have to do the work to make sure that we are compatible with that Free5GC. Free5GC versions, like any external stuff, even Kubernetes, right? If Kubernetes did something drastic and changed the API, which is unlikely, but if they do, it would also break whatever we're doing. So we can't just accept it. That we will, as part of SIG release, we're supposed to be knowing after testing that we for release or for even main branch, we are at a set of dependencies of the external dependencies. That includes portion on the other things too. So right. Free5GC is also a major one because that needs actual testing.
Right, and I imagine we'll have similar things with open air interface and other things. So I guess my point is, you know, a lot of this is a case-by-case basis. It's like, well, we'll just have to discuss in SIG 3 what to do when these issues come along. There's no general strategy for everything. It just really depends.
I mean, at the minimum, obviously, we need to have better functional tests. You know, to catch this kind of stuff. Particularly, this is patch. Is that patch against main or is it patch against
main?
Yeah, so
right? I don't think. Yeah, it's against main.
Yeah, so, for the main, yeah.
Which makes sense. So we're not going to support 3.3 and 1.0.
Yeah, of course.
Right. And actually, I think we're going to have to do quite a bit of work to get the operators working with the new configuration. So
right.
Yeah. But you know, this in a way, this PR is unrelated to that. We can still generate 3.3.0 images even if we're not. The operator doesn't use.
Oh yeah, this is an image generations. Yeah, and then we'll upgrade the operators to use them, but then making sure that. Yeah, but then in this. Oh yeah, because we're not changing our manifest to do the 3.0 images anyway. So that upgrade. Okay.
We would also have to. No, sorry. Yeah. We don't have a package for these. We have a package for the operator, not for these.
Not for the this themselves. But then our packages needs to be pointing to.
Has a tag for the images that.
Our image needs to be. So this is. The first one, for example, would already be kind of bad, right? Because we are pointing our common.go, I think. We're pointing our images to the latest image, which is not the right thing to do.
Yeah.
You can build it, which is great, but then we should not make the controllers start pointing to it, which is the bad thing. So
right,
so we can,
a while ago, we actually discussed having a feature in the operators where you can configure the image version. For like the Free5GC version.
It is there. The image version is there. Actually, not the image version per se. Image path. So the image path is an external configurable parameters.
Right.
But I don't think anyone configure them. They just take whatever is on default. So I think I think Ian is changing the default here, so that's not good.
Right.
Yeah. Other than that, everything else is okay. The common.go is the one that probably isn't great. Everything else is fine. But then the common.go is not good.
Yeah, we're kind of depending also on our trust of how Free5GC versioning works. So for example, let's say we're in the 3.3, we move to the 3.3.x branch of Free5GC. We're hoping that if Free5GC does a maintenance release 3.3.1, none of our operator code will have to change, right? It might just be a bug fix.
Oh no, I would guess for external dependencies that is that significant. Yeah. When we upgrade, we should run test anyway.
Well,
I mean, something random. like what Ian did probably is not a good practice in general, because our default test sample operator is 35GC. So if you break 35GC, it breaks stuff. So it's not a good thing.
Well, what they're doing doesn't break anything, because again, it's just new image versions.
Outside of common.go, yeah, outside of common.go. So if you take that out, the rest of them just building new images is fine. Then we can slowly migrate. There'll be like a real PL to say, you know, operator team upgrade the operators to support 3.0. And then once you do that, you can. What I would imagine is we would stop supporting anything earlier than 3.30, in which case we have the obsolete support of the 3.2 stuff also.
That's very likely, although
backward compatibility is not being talked about at all. So I don't think anyone in the operator side is actually thinking about that. But I remember when you did your last patch, you upgrade 35GC version, and I think it affects absolutely nobody except UPF. And then so we had to do the UPF change. So that's some work there to make sure that there is a separate patch there's separate PL to make sure that it is there. And then that change also makes 35G UPF no longer able to support a 3.1.x 35GC, because we never built the operator to make it like support multiple versions of 35GC.
That's true.
Which is another thing that we should think about doing moving forward. But then for 1.0, we didn't. It's like the cutoff is.
It's actually a feature I would like for the operator SDK that we eventually have to do, because in the real world, you do want to sometimes have the same operator support you know, previous versions. There are various reasons why you might want to do that in production, right? For a specific network function, not specifically 35GC, right? But let's think
so if you're thinking of the operator would be able to support more than one version of the target NF, then yes, then they have to write an operator that would support both.
Right.
But the current strategy has always been, so our expectation is the change in versions of operators would be a lot less frequent than a change in versions of the network function. At some point, the one operator supports, let's say, version X to Y, and then Y to Z, Y to whatever would be supported by another version of operators. But then the cutoff would always be the operator would not be able to support, you know, prior to Y and to X version, because we didn't build the operators to support both. But then if it is part of the requirement, then we would have to make it part of the requirement.
So the way a lot of operators out in the world do this, like let's take for an example the MongoDB community operator, right? So which unfortunately we're not using, but I hope we fix that. So the way it works, like it deploys a MongoDB cluster for you, but as a property in the CRD for the MongoDB cluster, whatever it's called, I think cluster, I think it's just called cluster. So you can give it a version of MongoDB that you want to deploy, right? So however, I'm talking from experience because I have used it and it was very painful. Certain versions don't work. You have to read the documentation very carefully, because certain versions of the operator support certain versions of MongoDB, and there's a bit of a matrix there of how the support works, right? I don't think they did it well. I think it's very confusing, because you can easily give a property with a version that will break, that will just not work, rather than them validating it properly. So we should do it properly. So this is looking ahead for the operator SDK. I think one of the things we can do is help with version control for vendors, right? So can make this easy. You know,
so the only thing that the only thing we really need to know in terms of requirements, that's actually more from the NF vendors, is whether or not it is a requirement for us actually, Nephew in general, and an SDK by extension, to have a single operator is able to manage two incompatible versions of the network functions.
I would say it is.
Yeah. If it is, then the strategy changes a little bit, because right now the operators get deployed onto its own namespace in the on the workload clusters. So the assumption has always been that the operators would manage, for our case, anything that is AMF, UPF, and SMF from 35GC that sits onto the cluster would be managed by that operator. So they don't, because we don't put an operator per each workload cluster's namespace. So we would assume that if let's say you run AMF is version X and then UPF is version Y. Well, AMF and SMF running in the same cluster. Yeah, UPF most likely is a different cluster anyway. SMF in version X and then an AMF in version Y. But then X and Y happens to be on. Although one is AMF and the other is SMF. The SMF version X and Y happens to be different in terms of config. The operator, because by virtue of able to support AMF version Y and SMF version X on the same cluster, they would still have to be able to support both SMF versions, config versions.
Right, but those are real world use cases that absolutely do happen. A vendor could upgrade something and they say, well, we'll test this upgrade in one region before we move it to the rest of the regions, and they might upgrade one at a time. These strategies absolutely do exist. And even more than that, this is something that Kubernetes does for us, but we have API versions, right? So we can have CRD version v1 and CRD version v2, and the operator can absolutely handle them separately, right? So, yeah, I think those are all.
This is good. This is a good requirement. So we'll think about it when we do the SDK, as well as actually restructuring the operator moving forward of doing that.
Yeah.
But then again, I guess the next version operator should be generated by the SDK anyway. So I guess that still goes back to SDK. That's the first.
Oh, I see Bala has joined us. Hi, Bala.
Yeah, I see Bala.
Hey guys, I'm still under the weather a little bit, but feeling okay. Thanks. Yeah.
Hey, Bala.
Hey. Hello.
Anyway, cool.
All right, so
we were talking about branching. So we're saying that let's backport for now, and then the second thing would be this PL as it is today. I don't think we can accept. So we'll probably come. I'll comment on it, I guess, to Ian. And then, but then we do welcome particular people from the Free5GC community to upgrade versions, not in terms of functional, but at least like building new images. In fact, we would love to have Free5GC people coming into our community, for sure.
So another thing about this. So I think that's a good idea to divide it into subdirectories, but it will also require to change the browse configuration for builds, just to create separate builds so this image will actually end up in a valid repos. So that's one other thing to remember. But yeah, I think that's actually a good proposal. Other than that, this would require, I guess, like a separate branch, but it will create more mess and confusion than, because what's then gonna be in the main? You would have to have like one branch 3.2 and one branch 3.3, or just keep in the main 3.3 as it's.
Yeah, no. So in this case, as Tal talked about, when we go into main, and then when we get to a point where we can support 3.3, we should have operator that can support 3.2 and 3.3
nice.
On main. So every release we're going to publish, we support Free5GC version X, Y, Z, blah blah blah. So this would be what we're doing. So at some point we cut off release of the older Free5GC, cut off support of the older releases of Free5GC. We haven't had any, phased out and ups or deprecation strategy yet. But then at some point we should stop supporting anything in the back and older versions. But then for now, I think the idea is we should create operator to a point where they can support different versions of Free5GC, at least the more recent 1 or 2 versions of Free5GC, moving forward. So instead of like putting out branch, one operator is 3.2 or 3.3, which is actually what I thought about at some point. The thing is, as Tal said, maybe we have to have operator that can support multiple versions workload of the application. So if that's the case, then sure, we can keep it into main, and then when we pull a branch off of main for release, that release includes support of the target network functions from this version to the other to this version. So we should it's a developer's job to make sure that the operator can support them. And then in terms of images, we just keep on building new images, because yeah. Okay, cool. Anything else to talk about for this week?
Yeah, nothing on my side.
Okay. If not, then we'll give you 20 minutes back, and well, thank you.
All right, cool. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Well, thanks, everyone. Have a good one.